Welcome to the Christensen Agate Marbles Identification Master Class video. We're joined by our instructor and Brooklyn's finest, Richie, the Renaissance man, Stremme. He'll be our professor for the day.
Brooklyn College.
And we're joined by fellow students and colleagues, Jimmy and David Tamulevich from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Good luck in the Christensen course, and we hope you pass the class. All right, cool. So this is the first course, right?
Yep.
Class number 1.
Yep. So what we're going to do is we're going to break things down into, take a little deeper look into naming of marbles. So we're going to start with just company names, move on to attributes that were kind of determined by the marble collecting community, like standard attributes, advanced attributes, and then specialty names. Okay, so we're starting off with company names. So the only 4 names that were ever boxed for Christensen Agate Company were Moon, World's Best Moon, and Moonies had the same like orangey glow behind them in the glass, but they didn't radiate a blue, and you'll see more like striations within the of the translucent white in an Mooney versus a Christensen Moon. And that, you can kind of tell it has an overall
back glow a little orange like an acro, but looking at it straight on, it's just bluer.
Just has that,
not hard to separate from acro.
And very clear. Like if you backlight it hard, the inside you might find a couple little wisps, while on an acro one you'll find more striation of that in between.
So that's World's Best Moon.
Okay. Bloodies was second box type. I could say the variant between the two, this one courtesy of David Tamulevich.
Yeah, thank you, David.
Discovered this morning.
Yeah, he's a student today with us.
And it's cool because it shows the variant between the two, because this one I got to pick like 25 years ago from a dilapidated bloody box. I went for the one that was mostly like a little drop of blood that had none of that like brownish sort of mixed in. You know, but what's neat is you can see the variant between the two. This one has a lot more of that earth tony brown.
Yeah, it's pretty.
To like, and neat thing between the two, even though they look like kind of different, right? With the base glass, they both have that like similar like one drop of white on top. And if you flip it over on mine, you could see how it was hand gathered. It was a hand gathered marble. Same thing with David's. If we flip it completely around, you could see, especially when that gets backlit a little bit, like...
Yeah, I see a little crease line there for sure.
Yep, and all it is applying the knowledge from the slag video, because remember, slags, like, you can see right through, and it's just one color white, so easy to see structure.
So, Richie, what are the distinguishing characteristics in... If somebody had one of those in their hand, are there any patterns, cut marks?
Only thing, like, and that was super good early on, like, I would have super trouble trying to pick apart the bloody style that I picked from a regular red slag. And the only thing that I could really say is, it seems like the same in structure. You have, like, blobs of white as opposed to, like, 2 seam, because Christensen isn't known so much for slags. You don't find as many, except for you, hand-gathered CAC slags, as you do 1 seam, 2 seam, or sometimes 3 seam. Like, I don't know if they went into more production later or whatever, but that kind of blobbiness of the white. Also, you'd never find that brownish mix in the true red slag base. So easier to identify a bloody that has that mix in it, the true bloody that isn't just red and white.
Oh, cool. So those are the bloodies.
Bloodies. Third is American agate.
Yeah. So that's a mossy base, sort of.
Yeah, like a translucent. It's almost like an in-between. I mean, you can almost see the way the color recycles a little bit between marbles or early marbles for Christensen. You have that translucent kind of off-whitish base, and then like what I think eventually it's like almost a salmony pinkish, but that turns into their salmon.
And then there's more of a red?
Yeah, there's a little more variant, I think, depending on when they were made. I've seen some that are much more crisp, opaque white, and it might be just the contrast between that same salmon but against a harsh white versus a soft white you get a
gonna
different
flash a different color at you.
Yeah, there are no cut lines on this. It's a swirl style marble.
Okay.
Right? So same thing would be true of a bloody, even if you find it in just red and white, you're not going to find a Christensen slag that's just swirl, that doesn't have either one cut, two cut, three cut, or a hand gather. While like if you found a later example of a bloody, or I think this is a little later example of American agate, it's a swirl marble. And as we go from this into like more advanced identifiers of names, that's where they distinguish swirling types or repetitive swirls that show up in Christensen's most often.
One type of marble that collectors should be made aware of here are the Yasuda transitional swirls. Yeah, these are pretty convincing for American agates, and they're a lot more common, so you're very likely to find these in lots. So they all show a bright, opaque candy apple red twist pattern on what I should say is a cheaper, opaque white milk glass looking base. It's the same glass they used in their forefingers. I've got a bunch right in here. Most of them exhibit a corkscrew pattern on one pole that begins to break up and fragment, and somewhere towards the other end, it tails off into a small whip. Yasuda transitionals don't really hold much value, and they're almost always found with a cold roll at that trailing pole.
Yeah.
Take a quick look at, this is a score David Tamulevich landed last week. So these are 3/4 inch Christensen slags, and that middle row is peach, hard to find.
Yeah, even bigger.
And the electric, yeah, maybe 7/8.
Yeah, that's the biggest.
That's awesome.
Biggest size I know that they did.
Thank you for bringing these. This is your class participation. This is an interesting color too, really.
And they glow.
Yeah.
That's a light. Very. Oh, these glow?
Yep.
Well, cool beans, and thank you.
Okay, so last company name is the Guinea, right? And by company name, it appeared on a box.
Yeah.
So we have, for boxed guineas, right? We have three types that were known at the time that made it into boxes. Clear Guinea,
Oh yeah.
Cobalt Blue Base Guinea, and Amber Guinea.
Nice.
Okay, so those were your three like box types
base
that were standard that made it into boxes. Another term that I didn't know that old timers would say is, oh, that's a box Guinea or it's not a box Guinea. And I thought like that related to somehow that has square pattern. I was just thinking box, like whatever.
I'm thinking box turtle, so
box
what do I know?
And this was this was how they applied it. See how in this marble, you could, if you catch it from the side, you could see there's some little open windows.
Yes.
Right? So their deal is a box Guinea was basically saying this was Christensen Agate's quality control. If it had any open spaces and there was nothing to see behind it, it got tossed. If it had any open space but you could see something behind it, it was a box Guinea. It was still going to make it into a CA box.
Then they were really inspecting their marbles.
Or,
They were
as the quality control. But one seam, two seam, three seam. I think I have examples of one seam and two seam here. That's your one seam. There's the second seam.
Okay.
So that's a two seam Guinea. Same with this. One seam right there.
Mm-hmm.
Flip it around. There's your second seam.
Yes.
Backlight it and you know it's amber base.
Yes.
This single sort of diaper foldy seam. Which we'll talk about in a minute. It has that fold over. But if you spin it, right?
Much
splotches
blotchier.
all around.
Yeah, not as stripy.
Because you're not pulling, you're not pulling both to the edge. And this last one, another classic two seam, but you can almost guess when you look at the three, you see the pulls, you know it's going to be pulling to somewhere else. It's pulling to that
that's
other
nice.
seam.
Yeah, very cool. So here's our single seam, and it's just a little more modeled there.
Yep. And we'll revisit like the three cuts when we get to striped opaques.
Okay. So were these nicknamed after the guinea hens that were?
Supposedly, I heard that originally they weren't boxed, that the guinea hens, flecked hens walked around the yard and that was the end of the day. And I think there's definitely a case for making end of day marbles.
What Richie's referring to with the end-of-day terminology is that some collectors suggest that the Guinea kaleidoscope of colors were produced with an accumulated end-of-day scrap glass. End-of-day is a glassworker's term for unused glass scrap and remnants. The glass gets ground up into tiny frit glass, mixed all up, and applied to various types of decorative glass products. A similar process can even be occasionally seen in some of your favorite punk rock vinyl records. Well, God save the Queen. We mean it, man.
Again, courtesy of David, great kind of found a half guinea that he dug himself, and you can see you got the pattern on one side.
Yeah.
You have the idea of Christensen palette, but what's great is like you can actually see
The base.
into the marble and see how, you can see the clear glass swirled around the inside, and then how like straight through the center of the marble, that guinea palette, like a cyclone or like a cobra or like just a dense amount of that full swirl of glass made it right through the middle of it.
Oh, so it's not just at the surface.
Right.
The Guinea
and that's, we're going to take
coverage.
a little longer look at how the name of Guinea evolved into other names as more specimens were found. But this exact thing that David shows us in that marble can be exemplified through the window in that marble.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, you can
and that's
see
one of those
colors inside.
That's one of those differences when we get onto advanced names, like when you have a Guinea that just has surface coverage fully around, or you have a Guinea, they want to call a Guinea cyclone or a Guinea cobra, where you have action inside going through, because not everyone did that. And obviously, like easier to spot or to make a difference to a collector if it's in clear than in blue, because you look at something like that, or the amber base, who knows what's inside there. Somewhere along the line, when different examples are found that weren't boxed, then the name or the traits that would define that name get expanded. So for example, in Block's book, right, this is one of the, it might not be the first time it was seen, but first time highlighted how many different bases there could be and how many variants were discovered since box guineas to other guineas that were found, dug, etc. Like for example, opaque blue base, opaque green base, right?
Yeah.
Guineas were previously always just on cobalt, amber, clear, but a transparent base. Now suddenly guineas don't have to have stripes, don't have to have spots. They could be striped. Right?
Yeah, the lines of delineation get fuzzier.
Right? You know? And
no doubt.
Again, then partial palette guineas. That red and white spots on a blue base.
Yeah.
No other spots. Black opaque based guineas. Green based guineas. Right?
All kinds of guineas.
And so the point is, and so there's always, here's one of my favorites, the George Jetson guinea.
Well, how about that?
My point is, you can take names to extreme no matter what, the more specific you get.
And only some of them stick anyway, right?
Right. And but you want to make sure that there's a method to the madness behind the name, so that you know what you can identify and you can feel confident in it. To me, if you can get one guinea with as much of a color palette as you can, and that way you really get a feel for what Christensen glass, what their palette was, because usually guineas will have at least 5, 6, 7 colors all in one.
Fully loaded, right?
Doesn't mean that if you find a marble that doesn't have that color in a guinea that it's not Christensen, it doesn't exist, but it's a real good way to get your color palette down. Straight clear, we got another, there's another really pretty clear.
Okay, yeah, put it right in the middle there.
Different palette,
yeah,
right there. The straight amber based.
Okay.
What's neat is, and this is another thing to take into consideration as you're collecting, is when that like colors on another base or they're slightly behind, you're going to get a distortion in color where it's not the exact, just like if you're drawing on a white piece of paper versus a tan piece of paper, you're going to get a different effect for what that. So same thing when you're looking at colors on an amber base or you're looking at colors on a cobalt base, can really get that distortion. A lot of you guys have requested more value estimates in these videos.
And while I'm not an appraiser, I have done my homework on these, and the thing to take away here is that Christensen Guinea types are among the most highly prized machine-made marbles ever produced. And that also goes for most of their flaming swirls and hard-to-find submarine types. Recent completed auction prices for Guineas show a consistent range of about $600 to $1,600 for full coverage mint condition examples. Exotic opaque-based Guineas, similar to the ones shown in this video, are painfully hard to find and have realized prices north of $4,000. For newer collectors, don't let these numbers deter you. Good Christensen deals happen all the time, and excellent examples are always out there. Take your time and enjoy the exciting thrill of the hunt. And be on the lookout for the upcoming Sammy Arim and Mike Johnson Christensen hardcover book titled Christensen Agate Toy Marbles. A huge thank you to Professor Richie and to all the collectors who have generously contributed to this video. If you like this video, please give it a like and stay tuned for class number 2. And thank you for watching Vintage Machine Made Marbles.